I think that we, specifically as women, have a responsibility to ourselves and to future generations to do this work internally, to excavate all those thoughts and to liberate ourselves from the crap that we got imposed on us. So, can we do the work to realize every time we think, feel, or experience this level of our autonomy being stolen, coercion, some way that we feel shrunk? Can we look at that and say, what if this isn't that situation, but that situation is just being a mirror to show me these old, awful, outdated, limiting thoughts that are keeping me from being fully free? Well, hello, everyone. Glad to be here with you. Today, we're going to talk about attachment theory, but from a little bit of a different angle. You may not know this about me, but in 2019, my friend Jai Flicker and I recorded a podcast before COVID. Unfortunately, COVID was kind of what terminated the podcast. So there's one season of a podcast called Parenting 3.0. The intention behind it was to create an alternative to the dominant parenting narrative and the permissive parenting narrative, and really help people to come back to the truth of knowing how to be the parent that they are by tapping into deeper psychological concepts and really to take the confusion out of parenting, bring us back to our roots, bring us back to knowing that it's built into us, but also giving us some of the information to help us to sift through all the noise and find what's really true for our child, us, and then what type of parent we want to be. And the premise of it is to foster an attachment relationship, to foster attachment between parent and child. I think the subtitle was Raising Emotionally Healthy Children. I don't know anyone who doesn't want to do that. So sometimes you hear me talk about parenting and me being an advocate for children. And I think that this is another example of a place where I've always wanted so badly to get to the ultimate, deepest root of anything that's going on in the world. And I think it always starts with parenting. And it starts with our children and prioritizing our children. So I hadn't talked to Jai in a while. It's actually a whole bunch of things. It was COVID. He had a child. He had another child. I had older kids, and life kind of happened. And then I moved, and I just hadn't seen him much. So we decided to connect yesterday. And we were having this really interesting conversation because he is starting a new business, and it was based on really this concept of having a ChatGPT or Claude. These are LLMs. They're large language models. Obviously, you know what they are. And you could just say it's a ChatGPT kind of thing. Well, anyway, he made a model that was based on really being able to go into this safer, more contained space that was based on a lot of the concepts that were in our podcast around self-determination theory, which is one of the most studied and kind of evidence-based, if you will, theories around motivation and well-being, and attachment theory, specifically around Gordon Neufeld and attachment theory, and around other psychological giants from the past who have really offered so much to what we know now. Carl Rogers, the book on becoming, was one of the things that we emphasized in there. There was so much more, but that's just like a good basis for it. So Jai wanted to have a place where people could go and feel safe that when they asked questions, when they wanted to gain clarity on something in their lives, or when they wanted to grapple with something, make a decision, uncover their blocks, that it would be from this framing of such a healthy, growth oriented, autonomy preserving, attachment oriented place for it's if you want to find it, it's called Wayfinder. I think it's wayfinderapp.ai. Well, in this conversation, he and I talked a lot about the podcast and about attachment theory and blah, blah, blah. And so self-determination theory has the premise. It's actually based on this being studied across all genders, ages, cultures, societies, and it stands true for everyone. That's what makes it so amazing. So there are three core elements that a human being must have. Think about their core psychological needs that everyone must have to thrive, to feel motivated in life. And that if you don't have these, you will languish. You won't thrive. You will do poorly. So you want to know what they are? Okay. Relatedness is one of them. These are in no particular order. So relatedness, like relationships, it's actually where attachment fits in. Then there's autonomy, which is you are making choices in your life and not being coerced. That's the basic gist. Some people might call this agency. And then competence, the ability to affect your environment. And we were playing around with some words to just get A words. And we were talking about attachment, autonomy, or agency, and action. And then we were just grappling with like, what order do they come in, or do they have any order? And in this conversation, Jai noticed something. He noticed that when I talked about autonomy, I talked about it slightly different than he did. And what we often talk about is autonomy as you are an autonomous being. You are able to make your choices and you're not being coerced by other people or systems or structures, that you get to choose how to live your life. Now, that's within the container of relatedness. So that doesn't mean that there aren't compromises or other decisions you make to kind of hold your way of being without having to dishonor another person. It's all three. So we don't want to be autonomous to the exclusion of relatedness. We don't want to be related where we become this people pleaser, so to speak, and we care only about our relationships and we don't care about our autonomy, because this goes back to when you don't have all of them, will languish. If you don't feel you have the ability to affect your life, your world, that you make an impact, which is competence, then you would languish. So they're all important. So there's inner experiences, there's external experiences, they all matter. But what Jai noticed was that when I talked about autonomy, I was often referring to, and I wouldn't have actually said these words, even though they're absolutely totally in alignment, the idea of, are you autonomous as in choice in your life, or are you being coerced by your unconscious thoughts, beliefs, limitations, constraints, fears, right? So the whole premise behind the Whole Soul Way is essentially that all of us have been conditioned in many, many ways. Don Miguel Ruiz talks about domestication. Like there's a way that our family of origin, our culture, our society has all these ways that we're supposed to be. And whether we are intentionally or unintentionally coerced, there's some external forces that make us feel like we should fulfill these roles and expectations with the shoulds of the world, that, there are these rules and all these things are imposed upon us, and then we are supposed to be that way. And even if we don't know where they came from, it doesn't really matter. Pretty much everything that we say that we should do without examining it is probably something that got imposed upon us. There's a word called introjection. And what happens with introjection is that someone else, something, the world, system structures, people, parents, clergy, teachers, yada, 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 siblings, say something, and then we take it on as our own belief, and we don't even remember that it was actually someone else's belief, and we consider it to be our belief. I mean, even beliefs like I'm not worthy or I don't matter or something like that, those are oftentimes things that we internalized and they became introjected, and then they became our belief, oftentimes never questioned. Just, this is what it is. Well, when that happens, the voice of others becomes the voice of ours, and we become our own oppressor. We become our own coercer. We coerce ourselves. We tell ourselves we need to be more like them or do something different or not do that, or I need to be a better wife or a better mother. And what does that even look like? And we look at other people and we compare. And what we're really trying to do is come back to like, what does this autonomous me think, feel, want, need? And I think so often we also learned, kind of coupled with this, that somehow we were wrong and bad for having our thoughts, emotions, needs, and preferences and opinions. Say with our parents, like if we were needy, we were too much, too difficult. It's wrong and bad to want that. I really tried so hard with my kids that when they wanted things that I thought were kind of extra, and then they were complaining about not getting it, not shaming them for wanting, saying like, of course you want that. Of course you want more. And there have to be some limits. So instead of, oh my God, nothing ever makes you happy. You always want more, which is the natural internal feeling of what we might want to say to our children, especially because we don't want them to be entitled little brats or something. But at the end of the day, the entitlement often comes from shaming people. It's really, can we honor and acknowledge all of our impulses and our needs so that we don't have to make anyone wrong and bad for having an impulse? It doesn't mean they get what they want, but they can feel what they feel. They can want what they want. They can need what they need. And why do I say that? Because I think that's another piece to this, is that we learned that our opinions, preferences, needs, desires, and impulses are wrong and bad. So therefore, parents, society, and teachers, they have the thing that is right, and we should be more like that. And we lose our inner compass. We lose who we are. We lose our autonomy. And so back to Jai, it's kind of funny because, when you look at what autonomy means, it really does mean to be able to be, I think it's free to choose without coercion. We all want that, right? Let's just say most people, I recognize that there are some people who are in exceptional situations, but most people are pretty free. We can choose to do what we want to do. The worst offender of coercion is us, our own thoughts, our own mind. Those old introjected ideas, those limiting beliefs that we've never explored or examined, or we've tried to, but we haven't been able to unhook from. Like, I want you to even picture yourself. And I want you to picture you enter a room and you are reading the room for cues and signals of how you should behave. And when you've overstepped and understepped, and you might say, well, that's just being like a, empathetic person or a person who reads the room. What's wrong with that? But often we don't even realize it. But what we're looking for are cues that remind us unconsciously of childhood. When did mommy and daddy act that way? When did they move their eyes in that specific way? And when they moved their eyes in that specific way, I knew that they were distracted, or they were annoyed, or I was being too much, or that they were feeling some feelings. And they might not have even been feeling the feelings that we interpreted that they were feeling. Okay, so like our mom might have moved her eyes in a funny way while she was saying something to you, and then you took it in a different way. Like we perceived things as children that weren't necessarily fact. They were our interpretation of the surroundings. And then because our survival was dependent on them, we tweaked ourselves and altered ourselves to be a person that is acceptable, palatable, and that mommy and daddy aren't going to be mad at all the time. It was really wise, super, super resourceful. No problem with that. But then when we get to be adults, we have to start to say, wait a second, where's all this stuff coming from? So let's just picture you walk into a room. Let's just say it's a boardroom. There are a lot of men in there. And you typically are a pretty confident person, but something happens. You walk in and all of a sudden you feel a little bit small. You don't even know if you can take a seat at the table where you thought you were going to, because now it feels a little bit daunting. Like, oh my gosh, like I'm a little intimidated. So you now have these thoughts and feelings and sensations. And those are oftentimes these things from the past that you're now shrinking yourself. You're coercing yourself to be a certain way to feel safe in that room. Now, was it those men? Maybe. Maybe they really are making women feel inferior. Or maybe it's a perception that got internalized into you that when a person does this thing, moves their body in a certain way or looks at you in a certain way, it triggers something inside of you. And then you basically take on this feeling, this sensation, this impulse to not be autonomous anymore, to be who others need you to be or who you think you need to be in order to feel safe, not get into trouble, not get embarrassed, not take up too much space, not risk someone saying something that does feel uncomfortable. So we then steal our own autonomy. We marginalize ourselves. We oppress ourselves. We do. And I'm not saying that you weren't marginalized, oppressed, and other things in life that kind of like added up and added up and added up. But the question is it our own freaking thoughts, our own perceptions of situations that keep us locked in? So can we do the work to realize every time we think, feel, or experience this level of our autonomy being stolen, coercion, some way that we feel shrunk, can we look at that and say, what if this isn't that situation, but that situation is just being a mirror to show me these old, awful, outdated, limiting thoughts that are keeping me from being fully free? Autonomy is like freedom. It's like a level of freedom. So you can either look at the world and say, everybody else needs to change so that I can feel more autonomous. Stop with these systems and structures that coerce me, or dominant narratives and dominant structures. Don't get me wrong. I think we need to change those things too. I think people need to be more aware of them and how those things are built in, and then they further cement the beliefs that we have, and they amplify them and they poke at them. But I think that we, specifically as women, have a responsibility to ourselves and to future generations to do this work internally, to excavate all those thoughts and to liberate ourselves from the crap that we got imposed on us. Let's just say that we grow up in a family where we're made to feel small, where we didn't get our attachment needs met, where our parents weren't there validating us and helping us to turn into the magnificent being that we are here to be. And somehow we internalize all these messages. Let's just consider that to be a form of abuse or neglect, or even just, I don't know, ignorance. It's bad enough that it had to happen to us, right? But do we want to keep perpetuating this level of harm on ourselves? That's what I think in the wholesale way is the key, is to basically peel away all the shit that's not us and then reclaim who we are. Because those layers are not you. They never were you. You actually are there underneath layers of other people's beliefs, their shoulds and their expectations and their unhealthy crap, their traumas, blah, 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 plus your own traumas layered on, plus your own things that you've, collected along the way. Happens to all of us. And imagine that there's like a cloak on us that's covering us, like an invisibility cloak that keeps us safe. But then there's also a bunch of places we had to cut off from, and we become internally fragmented. Maybe our heart, because it hurt too much to be in our heart. Maybe it's our body. Maybe we experience some form of abuse and we need to cut off from our bodies. Maybe it's just because we live in a society that values thinking more than feeling, and doing more than being, and producing more than creating from the heart, And because of that, we naturally, just through swimming in the water, we value our heads more than our bodies and our hearts. but also like all those times when you were young and you were being either silly or loud or rambunctious or too smart, whatever it is, all those things you learned in very unconscious ways that they weren't okay. You can't be that way. Don't be that way. And then you put them aside, but those are parts of who you are. They are. I mean, maybe some of those needed to be refined a little bit. Like maybe you were a little bit loud without paying attention to your surroundings, but that doesn't mean that being loud is objectively wrong. It depends on the circumstances. Maybe it's dancing and singing and playfulness. And I don't know, like it's something about that any characteristic pretty much does have good in it. And it's always about finding a balance, not about saying, mom and dad told you to be kind, caring, respectful, and all of that. And I'm not saying, okay, now go be mean and disrespectful and uncaring. That's not the point. It's just that within all of us, we have a range of emotions. And oftentimes we learn how to be kind, caring, and respectful while disrespecting ourselves, while not being kind to ourselves. So that would be the balance there, in my opinion. So, what Jai was pointing out was how much I'm about the empowerment of us to say, it doesn't matter. Like you might have been disempowered, you might have been coerced, but let's make sure we're not coercing ourselves. We are not letting our unconscious thoughts control our lives. Let's make sure that we are choosing to be autonomous within our own brains, within our own bodies and hearts, within our own actions in the world. So I think that's pretty cool. I think that's pretty cool. And for me, I don't want to wait around for the world to change before I can feel free. I just don't want to do that. I want to be liberated by me. So bad things happen. Do you really want to believe that when bad things happen and you get attachment wounds and things like that, that you're forever doomed? Or do you want to feel the sense that, no, actually, I have total empowerment? And I'm going to leave you with this thought because I'm going to invite you to go to season 1 and go learn the whole soul way. I'm going to leave you with this thought, which is that in addition to this, I believe that about attachment theory. So if you didn't get all of your attachment needs met, you have unmet childhood emotional needs, maybe even physical needs, you have gaps. You could either say, I'm doomed. I'll always be avoidant. I'll always be anxious. I'll always be disorganized. Or you can learn how to reparent yourself. So I just never want to believe that the way that I was raised and any gaps that my very imperfect and your very imperfect parents had, that I'm a victim of that. I'm not going to let that stuff own me. I want to know that I can rebuild. And you can. I'm telling you, my life is so much better in countless ways because I have learned how to be my own parent, the parent that I most needed and wanted as a child. No parent is going to get everything right. They're just not, even if you don't remember. It's just not possible. And I tell my own children there are gaps. And the good news is that when you become an adult, you can shore up those gaps. You can actually reparent yourself. So the idea is that if you identify gaps, places where your attachment needs weren't met, your emotional needs weren't met, you didn't get certain information, you can either sit there and say, poor me, I never got those needs met. Don't get me wrong. There's a place for having compassion and grief. And that's why you have to step in and become that parent for yourself. And you may say, I don't understand how to do that. Well, go do the whole soul way and you'll start to learn because you are not one integrated being. I can assure you, you're not. You have many different parts of you. And there are these protector parts that come up and they're very loud and they're protective and they're the ones that tell you, play small, do this. It's the survival orientation of us. Those are our coping mechanisms, our defense strategies. When we get triggered, that's the protector. Your inner protector is one. You got your inner child with a bunch of feelings and unmet needs and this desire to be seen and held and honored. You've got your highest self, the one that's got the wisdom, the one that sees perspective, the one that has another view. And then you've got your inner adult. Now, within each of these, there are many, many different pieces too. But you got your inner adult, and your inner adult's the one that's like, I hear everybody, I see everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Inner child, let me hold you. Inner protector, I'm with you now. You don't have to do all the work anymore. Highest self, thank you so much for sharing more perspective. And then the adult you steps in as the loving alpha. That's a Gordon Neufeld term. We have a podcast episode on the Parenting 3.0 about that. The loving alpha is the one that says, I am here to take care of you. It is a unidirectional process here. There's a parent, not a dominant parent, a growth-oriented parent, that finally your inner child gets to rest in their love. And we can do that for ourselves. It may seem a little uncomfortable and awkward, but I'm telling you, you can do it for yourself. That is why, my friends, I want you to go to season 1 of the ELATE podcast and start to learn the whole soul way for yourself, to repair your attachment wounds internally. Now, it's great if other people can do that for you. I totally 100% support that. But not everybody has that. Where you can, if other people can be providing that level of safety, where you can rest in their love and where you can learn to accept yourself through them accepting you, beautiful. But for me personally, my journey has been that I've had to do this work first, and then it gets reflected in the world. So when someone went into that boardroom, someone had certain expression that caused that person to have a certain reaction that caused them to feel small and shrink and feel like they were a child again. They were seeing a reflection of what they deeply got introjected into them. Young parts that got coerced to believe something about themselves. That triggered that. That person was a mirror for that. Imagine when you have healed attachment wounds, where you are more whole and you feel more full and you no longer carry those old beliefs and stories. And then you walk into that boardroom. Now you're stronger, more autonomous, securely attached to yourself. You comes in, and it doesn't matter how someone else is acting. You're no longer taking that on, or they're reflecting your brilliance. They're reflecting your security. Imagine that. My therapist used to say, and I've probably said this before, Deb, everything's going to get a lot easier when you realize that there's no one else out there but you. There you go. The idea would be everyone's a mirror. You can either look at them as somehow they're doing something to you, or you can look at them and say, thank you for showing me something in me. Thank you for showing me something that I have the power to reflect on, to explore, to accept and integrate into the wholeness of who I am, to make me realize a place where I have a hole inside of me that's causing me fragmentation. Thank you for showing that to me. And that might be a stretch for you. I want you to consider it. And there is an episode early in season 1, and it's everyone's a messenger and a mirror. You might find that that's a beneficial place for you to start to explore this concept if it's new for you. But otherwise, you don't have to be a victim. You don't have to be a victim of all the stuff that you had to deal with. You get to pick up the baton, pick up where your parents left off, fill those gaps, heal yourself, provide to yourself that which you most needed and wanted when you were a little girl or little boy, if you're listening. Yeah, you could do it. And you can come into the wholeness. You can become the emotionally mature and spiritually whole woman that you have always been, that you are meant to be, that you were born to be. You can do that. All right, rock on. Come on, we can do it. We don't have to wait for other people. We can do this for ourselves.